Hi folks, I'm Chuck Block. We're doing 52 weeks of Python in 10-minute sessions. Today's topic is scapy. There's a lot of information about scapy out there, and if you want the whole picture, you're going to need to look at that. But we will be giving you a few examples of sniffing packets and injecting packets into the network. So let's get started. Okay, so let's talk about scapy. First thing is, no, I don't know how to pronounce scapy, whether it's scapy, that just sounds too much like a disease for me, so I'm going to call it scapy throughout the rest of this discussion. Now, as you can see from my page here, there is plenty of documentation about scapy. You can get lots of information, way more detailed than maybe you're looking for at the very beginning. You may get into it in great detail, and these will be good resources for you. So there's a lot of stuff online for you to learn about scapy. I have my own scapy example, and that's what we'll be going through in this lesson. I should probably read for you scapy's self-description. It says scapy can easily handle most classical tasks like scanning. I've done that. Trace routing, I've done that in Quokka. Probing, unit tests, attacks, network discovery, I use that in Quokka as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that it can do. My code will look at some of those. Now, scapy has a lot of functionality. As you can see, this first line here is me just using scapy, but you can also utilize their definitions of layer 2, layer 3 type stuff, Ethernet, ARP, etc. And I do that in this code. Now, the most basic thing that scapy can do is sniff packets. So basically, this is your packet capture functionality like Wireshark does. We'll look at PyShark a little bit later in this course. If you want to sniff for packets, then you need to specify the interface. You can specify a length of time or a number of packets. Here I'm specifying that I want scapy to listen and quit once it's got to 10 packets. Now you can also do a little bit more. When I do sniff here, I'm specifying not only the interface, but I'm saying I only want you to look at a particular type of packet, and there's a certain format that you can follow that's kind of a general purpose format that specifies the protocol and the port for which it will listen, and it will only actually count the ones that it sees against that when it does the packet capture, so it will throw everything else away. Now, as in these, you can see that I'm taking this capture object that has been returned to me by scapy once the sniff was done, and I'm calling a function called nSummary that will print out the packets for me. It's quite handy to get a snapshot view of what it found. And I do the same thing right here where I'm getting only UDP port 53 packets, so I can do that as well. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, then you can take your capture that you received, just like up here, and then you can iterate through them. And so you can use a for loop. This capture object is iterable, meaning I can go through it, and for every one iteration through here, I get a packet, and packet has a function that I can call, or a method I can call, called show, which will print it out in a little bit more detail. Now in these examples, you'll notice I did my sniffing and I waited till it was done, and the result of all the packets was put into this thing called capture, and then I dealt with capture. You can also do this in a different way, as you'll see right here. In this situation, what I'm doing is I'm doing everything exactly as before, but I'm passing in a parameter to sniff called PRN. I don't actually know what that stands for, but that is the function that's going to get called whenever a packet is received that matches the filter that we are interested in. And this is the function right here. You can see I've defined it, and all I'm going to do is print out packet summary. So in this situation, I'm printing these out as I receive them. Now, sniffing packets is only one thing that scapy can do. It can also inject packets into the network and then look for responses. So down here you can see an example of where I'm doing that exact thing. Now this looks complicated, and all of the details of scapy in our little 10-minute on-ramp into scapy I'm not going to be able to go over, but you can probably, if you understand a little bit about layer 2, layer 3 type stuff, then you understand what I'm generally doing right here just by looking at some of the functionality. I will tell you two things. Number one, This thing right here does exactly the same thing as this more complicated one up above. This is a shortcut version of how to do this. I'm doing an ARP ping in the network in order to discover devices. If you want to know how useful that is, I can tell you that I do that exact same thing in my host monitoring and discovery process for Quokka Prime. So with this simple call right here into scapy, I discover all of the nodes in the network. So yes, it is very useful to do. Okay, this last section is a while loop that does a port scan on the requested device. Now, I don't find this port scan to be all that useful. I'm just putting it here. You can look at another example. There are many examples in the scapy documentation. I don't even use port scan from scapy in order to do my port scans. I use the nmap version. So not going to spend time on this, but this is part of the code if you want to look at it. Okay, let's run this thing and see what happens. Oops, as you can see, it failed, and here's my stack trace that it's telling me operation not permitted. I've seen that enough to know that I need to be running this as super user. There are certain functions in scapy that require super user capability because we're doing so many low-level things. So I need to run this from a terminal window. Okay, here we are. You can see I need to run it with sudo, so I'm a super user, and I'm going to let it run. And let's see what happens. Packet summaries. Now it got a bunch of packets of everything you can see. Not a lot of really interesting stuff going on here. Now it's doing DNS and it's waiting for 10 DNS packets. And I can tell you, I'm going to have to poke it in order to get it to do something more interesting. So what I'm going to do is there, I got some right there. Just doing, bringing up a new tab actually achieved this for me. So let's go back and see what we got here. Let's go to the top of this and look at the output. So you can see there's a lot of output. Here's my first packet summaries that we looked at. Here's my DNS packet summaries. Remember, we had to stimulate it by opening a browser, but it caused it to do a bunch of stuff. I'm not sure if that was related to my browser or not, but it did some DNSs. Then we did DNS, but it's actually printing the entire thing out. So you can see all of this really useful information that it's doing. That's a DNS request, another DNS request, another DNS request. This, I can look inside all of my DNS requests here and see a whole bunch of interesting stuff going on. I'm going to scroll down to the end. Here, capture and print packets as sniffed. So here, these were printed as we sniffed it. I have some code in there that uses a lambda function that I didn't go over in this class. That's basically the same thing. This down here is using the arpping function, and you can see the results. These are the nodes that were discovered in that arpping. Now the last thing that it's allowing me to do is I can enter an IP address of a device. I'm going to do 192.168.254.254, which is my router. Now this, the way that it is in the code, and I don't know why it works this way, but it is going to run and over again. But it finally found that all of these ports here are allegedly open. Now when I do nmap port scanner, it tells me these ports are not open. So basically what's happening is the way that I'm running this port scan using this type of, there are many parameters that you can give, using this flag is returning all of these open ports. I think this is really probably not as dangerous as it might be, but then I'm not an ethical hacker, so what do I know? Anyway, that is the running of scapy. Okay, so let's do a quick review. We talked about scapy. We talked about how there's a boatload of information out there for you if you want to examine it. We looked at code that I wrote that does sniffing in various ways, including looking at sniffing where we are actually going on a packet-by-packet basis and getting interrupted and printing it out rather than waiting till the entire sniffing process is done. We saw that we can inject packets into the network, and we saw that we can use arpping and how that's actually what I end up using in Quokka Prime as well. So that's what we talked about. Hopefully it makes sense. If not, be sure to let me know. And as always, thanks for listening.